Jen awakens on a deserted island, wrestling with heartbreak and terror after a cruise ship catastrophe. As danger lurks in the shadows, she faces the haunting truth of isolation and loss. Amidst unmatched horror, will she confront her fears to protect those she loves? Can you sacrifice your morals when survival is on the line? If you want to dive into real stories of parallel realities every day, in enigmatic, technological worlds that are completely different from our planet, subscribe to our channel and leave your like. Well, let's go. The sun bore down mercilessly upon the desolate beach, its rays slicing through the unforgiving sky. The glistening waves, once a soothing embrace, now seemed to lash out in judgment. Jen's eyelids fluttered open, her vision blurred as salty air burned at her lungs. Struggling against the weight of confusion and despair, she took in her surroundings. Scattered remnants of a shattered cruise ship swirling in the ocean's grasp. Metal twisted grotesquely, and echoes of laughter and joy seemed to haunt the stillness, reminders of what had been. As clarity returned in stark flashes, her heart plummeted. Beside her lay Brad. His once vibrant spirit was now encased in a battered shell. Crushed seashells crunched beneath her frantic movements as Jen knelt beside him, her hands trembling. His face, usually radiating warmth, was pale and bruised. Desperation surged within her, coursing through her veins like a roaring river. She shook him gently, calling his name, but silence enveloped them both, an echoing void where hope should dwell. The salty mist hung heavy in her throat, stifling her cries. Panic gripped her heart like a vice. Alone, utterly and irrevocably alone, on this forsaken shore, Jen steeled her resolve. The primal instinct for survival pulsed in her veins, urging her to move. With a glance back at Brad, she pressed forward, leaving the familiar in search of the unknown, determined not to succumb to despair. The jungle loomed before her, lush yet menacing, a cacophony of rustling leaves and unseen creatures reverberating through the air. Shadows danced at the periphery of her vision, their long fingers clutching at her courage. Each step was a gamble, a question marked by uncertainty as she ventured deeper into the embrace of tangled vines and towering trees. The world around her was alive, but it was a heartbeat laced with danger. With each stride, Jen's heart raced not just from exertion, but from the realization of her vulnerability. Her senses heightened, she became acutely aware of the scent of damp earth mixed with something metallic, almost feral. She foraged through the underbrush, hands fumbling to collect fallen fruits and edible greens, her mind racing against the nightmares lurking within the wilderness. What horrors had met her and her friends? What awaited her next? Days blurred into an agonizing haze of survival. Hope flickered faintly amidst gnawing despair as Jen fought to keep it alive. Each night she sheltered herself under a twisted canopy of branches, fears flooding her mind as the sounds of the jungle morphed into a haunting chorus. She fashioned crude weapons from sharpened sticks and leaves, the weight of loneliness settling upon her shoulders like heavy chains. As the sun dipped each evening, painting the sky with splashes of crimson and violet, the island itself seemed to awaken. Nightfall, however, was not merely a transition from day to dark. It became a blanket under which terror lurked. As she drifted into troubled slumber, the images of Brad's lifeless body haunted her dreams, twisting her heart into knots. Questions spiraled through her thoughts with each haunting roar echoing in the distance. What more lay hidden in the shadows? What fate awaited anyone who wandered too deep into the island's embrace? It wasn't long before her search led her to a chilling discovery. Exploring the island's fringes, Jen stumbled across an improvised graveyard during one of her exhausting treks. A cluster of shallow mounds barely concealed by the island's vegetation. Each mound bore remnants of lives extinguished, marked by the agony of despair and silence. The names whispered by the wind, each one a testament to the souls who had faced the island's terror before her. Chilled to the bone, she stumbled backward, heart racing with the weight of realization. For every tree that twisted skyward and every leaf that rustled in the wind, there lay stories, sorrowful echoes of those who had come before her, lost to the very darkness that prowled beyond her grasp. As she stood before this forgotten cemetery, where hope had been snuffed out like a candle in the night, the enormity of her solitude bore down on her like the pressing weight of the jungle itself. In the dim light of dusk, Jen detected something slick and fresh staining the earth beside the graves. Following the ghastly marks leading back to the shore, she felt her gut twist in terror. The deeper the tracks burrowed into her mind, the harsher her breaths became. The realization that she was not alone clawed at her sanity, reverberating through her core. The darkness had claimed the souls buried there, and it hungered for more. In a fit of despair mingled with resolve, she returned to the place where she had last seen Brad. The beach, a paradox of beauty and horror, was now a stage of her unfolding nightmare. Frantic, she scanned the waters, dread constricting her throat when her eyes widened. The sands, once welcoming, now revealed a new horror. Gory drag marks tracing a path beneath the waves, leading away from the remnants of her past. Her heart plunged, unraveling threads of rational thought. A creature, lurking beneath the surface, had claimed her friend. Clenching her fists, she knew she could not falter. She would confront the darkness. With each passing day, time melded into an endless haze of fear and survival. Jen forged makeshift weapons, striking out at the air around her as if daring the shadow to emerge. Yet, the island remained as silent as the graves she had found. It wasn't until she encountered Lucas and Mia, two fellow souls stranded here amid their own misfortunes, that she felt a thread of connection, a flicker of hope. Lucas, tall with tousled dark hair, exuded a quiet confidence that belied his own fear. Mia, with a coppery mane and striking blue eyes that sparkled with mischief, was a force of nature, full of laughter yet shadowed by hidden doubts. Initially, their presence offered a reprieve from the crushing loneliness that had settled in Jen's chest. They shared stories of the world beyond, of technology and adventure, whiling away the ominous hours as they navigated the island together. But as days stretched on, Jen felt an uneasy tension lingering beneath their camaraderie. The couple dismissed her warnings about the lurking dread that had claimed its territory on this forsaken piece of land. Their laughter echoed hollowly, a discord ringing against the backdrop of her unease. Jen bit her lip, weighing the cost of fear versus the power of denial. Could they truly afford to ignore the grave markers? Or would they become another ripple in the monstrosity of time? One fateful night, as the sky crackled with the foreboding charge of a brewing storm, Jen's fears coalesced into terror. Days unfurled like pages of a grim novel, the sun a relentless spectator in the sky as Jen roamed the island. Every step through the dense, whispering jungle was laced with a growing sense of abandonment. She grappled with the haunting specters of her previous life, the laughter shared with Brad, the faint scent of sea salt mixed with sunscreen, the peaceful days before the catastrophe. Each memory gnawed at her, a paradox that left her thirsting for hope while drowning in grief. It was on the sixth day that she stumbled upon the graveyard, the unmarked mounds of earth aligned like the harrowing seeds of despair. They bore witness to the quiet, creeping death that nested within the island. In the shadows, the very trees seemed to conspire, their branches twisting like gnarled fingers pointing toward the past. They bore evidence of lives extinguished, dreams suffocated beneath the weight of an unseen predator. With a trembling resolve, Jen set about crafting weapons from her surroundings. The stone knife was her creation, jagged and rough, yet glistening with promise under the sparse sunlight that broke through the canopy. She clutched it tight, her fingers slick with sweat and anxiety, knowing that every sound, every rustle in the foliage could herald her demise. One fateful afternoon, while honing her crude weapon, a memory ignited within her. The brief flicker of Brad's laughter echoed in her thoughts, bringing with it a sharp pang of nostalgia. What would he have done in her place? She could almost hear his voice urging her forward, pushing her to confront her fears rather than cower in their shadow. Her musings were abruptly shattered when she discovered the terrifying signs of her own demons, a massive drag mark leading toward the shoreline. Heart racing, she followed the trail, each step echoing the rhythm of her trepidation. As she reached the water's edge, a horror awaited her. The broken remnants of Brad's once vibrant form were gone, leaving nothing but an unsettling void, as if he had never existed at all. Her breath caught in her throat as understanding washed over her. This island was no sanctuary. It was a theater of death, its curtain drawn for the unwary. She was not alone, and the monster lurking in the depths had claimed its first victim. Thoughts raced chaotically, pondering the monstrosity that stalked her. A creature that thrived in the shadows, feeding on isolation and despair. With a knot of dread tightening in her stomach, Jen fortified herself, the reality of the situation sinking in. She transformed fear into fuel, her body thrumming with energy as primal instinct kicked in. She began crafting traps and setting up defenses, employing her swift intellect to navigate the perilous landscape. Each fallen branch and every sharp stone became an ally in her battle against the malevolent force that lay in wait. Nights passed under a shroud of darkness. The sounds of the jungle morphed into a symphony of dread. The occasional rustle could be anything, a harmless creature scuttling across the forest floor, or the unmistakable sound of the monster, waiting patiently, calculating. Jen crafted a makeshift shelter, a small haven amidst chaos, shrouded by vine and brush, but the shadows loomed taller than ever, swallowing her sense of security. One fateful evening, as the oppressive darkness settled over the island, a sound broke the stillness, a deep, throaty growl. It reverberated through the trees, a sound so primal and raw that it cast every nerve in her body alight with fear. Jen's heart pounded in her chest, a constant reminder that time was running out. She readied her knife, crouching low as the night air thrummed with tension. The jungle seemed to breathe alongside her, each rustle a whisper, each shadow a fleeting promise of horror. She could taste the fear on the edge of her complacency, a bitter copper taste that mingled with the salt from her tears. Suddenly, from within the dark foliage, two glowing eyes pierced the night. They were cold, calculating. Sweat dripped from her brow as she instinctively stepped back, adrenaline surging through her veins like liquid fire. The creature prowled, a silhouette laced with sinewy muscle and glistening scales that shimmered ominously, revealing a visage that belonged to nightmares. It circled her like a predator toying with prey, and in that moment, Jen understood the ethical chasm that laid beneath her reality. What was it that made a life expendable? What did it mean to survive when others had perished, leaving behind only remnants of their existence? These deep questions tore at her mind as she readied herself for the inevitable confrontation. Fear and resolve twisted together like the roots of ancient trees, the desire to survive battling against the specter of guilt for those she lost. In this twisted landscape, survival carried the weight of sacrifice, a burden heavier than the knife she gripped. And so she waited. The creature's growls resonated like a dark lullaby, lulling her into a trance of both dread and anticipation. Every heartbeat marked the seconds until a life-altering encounter. The moon hung high, half hidden behind creeping clouds, casting an ethereal glow over the beach and jungle. It lit up a world poised on the precipice of chaos. The creature lunged, a blur of scales and fury, striking with ferocity. Jen barely dodged, rolling quickly to reclaim her footing. The island roared with the violence of their encounter, each clash a testament to the struggle for existence. Memories of Brad flooded her, igniting a flame within her spirit. He would want her to fight, to unleash every ounce of determination against the darkness that threatened to consume her. As the struggle unfolded, Jen fired on instinct, weaving through its strikes as she slashed at its hide. Closer, closer she moved, heart racing, adrenaline coursing her veins like wildfire. They became entwined in an epic dance, a warrior confronting a nightmare, each driven by primal urges that pushed them deeper into the night. But before she could land a decisive blow, an unsettling thought gnawed at her consciousness. This creature, this manifestation of terror, was not simply a monster. Was it a consequence of human actions, of neglect, or a result of a deeper violation of nature? Jen hesitated, caught in the moral quandary of preserving her life at the cost of another being's. Was she not becoming the very thing she sought to escape, entangled in a cycle of violence that felt inescapable? Her inner turmoil surged, bringing her action to a halt as guilt weighed heavily. Time suspended as the creature regarded her, its eyes bright with agitation, seemingly aware of her hesitation. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a participant in a fate woven with strands of inevitability. As the creature prepared to charge once more, long instincts kicked in, urging her to push through the hesitation. But an electric moment of clarity struck her. Hope flickered like a dying ember when Jen first laid her eyes upon the newcomers, Lucas and Mia, as they emerged from the fractured tree line. Their silhouettes contrasted sharply against the backdrop of a darkening sky, shadows stretching long as if attempting to grasp onto their fleeting warmth. Lucas, tall and lean with tousled dark hair, bore visible scars of survival. A jagged cut on his forehead and dirt-streaked cheeks highlighted his rugged demeanor. His emerald green eyes glistened with a mixture of curiosity and wariness, assessing the empty expanse of the island as if it were a living, breathing entity. Mia, on the other hand, was a polar contrast. With bright auburn hair cascading over her shoulders and a petite frame, she possessed an air of spirited resilience. Her laughter rang out like wind chimes in the quiet, yet the nervous energy thrumming beneath each sound hinted at an underlying vulnerability. The two were an unexpected duo, a camaraderie born from shared dislocation and survival instinct. At first, relief coursed through Jen as she approached them. Their presence cultivated the flickering hope that perhaps they could face the island's terror together. With a racing heart, Jen shared her harrowing tale, of Brad, of the improvised graveyard she stumbled upon, and the lurking menace that haunted her every moment. As she spoke, the weight of her solitude began to dissipate, resonating within the shared humanity of her newfound allies. Yet, as her fears poured out like a river, their laughter drifted into the air, echoing against the dense foliage that surrounded them. Lucas's dismissive chuckle sliced through her words as he said, "You've seen shadows in the dark, not monsters." But with each jest, every unfounded reassurance, the tension within her began to twist tighter. An underlying rift emerged, one that was born from the discrepancy between Jen's experiences and the perceived normalcy that Lucas and Mia clung to. The nights grew longer, swathed in an oppressive silence that was only broken by the haunting sounds of the forest. The rustling leaves, the distant crash of waves, and otherworldly calls that transcended nature. Jen's every instinct screamed of danger, but those instincts felt muted in the company of her new allies. Was it fear that dwelled within her, or was there truth buried in their resounding laughter? Confusion tugged at her mind, whether to trust the strangers or to heed the ancient warnings entwined within her very bones. One night when the pall of darkness was particularly heavy, the air crisp with a foreboding chill. The island breathed restlessly. As the moon cast an eerie light over the trees, an awful growl resonated, slicing through the stillness. The world around them seemed to shift as though the island were alive, its heart beating in sync with the terror that unfolded. Suddenly, Mia was gone, vanished without a trace, swallowed by the sinister embrace of the shadows. Lucas's expression morphed from disbelief to horror within microseconds as panic seized him, eyes wide with confusion, mirroring Jen's own frantic heartbeat. Jen's mind raced, the surreal feeling of helplessness gnawing at her resolve. The laughter that had once echoed so lightly in the air shattered, replaced by chilling silence. Jen's throat constricted as her heart plummeted. She couldn't let despair consume her. With an urgency born from survival, Jen plunged once again into the jungle's embrace. The dense foliage closed in around her, the twisted branches reaching out like skeletal arms attempting to tether her down. Moonlight filtered through the leaves, but the darkness was absolute, suffocating. All around her, vivid memories of Brad and now Mia spurred her forward, fierce determination igniting her blood. Using her instincts as a beacon, Jen navigated through unfamiliar terrain. Each rustle in the underbrush, every snapping twig sent tendrils of fear cascading down her spine, yet she pressed on. The scent of damp earth and salt hung thick in the air, tangible reminders of the ocean waiting beyond the trees. But it was the putrid odor mingling with the forest's natural fragrances that fueled the terror coursing through her veins. Hours felt like days as she encountered unfathomable sights along her pathway. Strange markings adorned the trees, symbolic etchings that hinted at an ancient ritual long forgotten, perhaps remnants of a civilization that had once thrived before the island claimed them. An unsettling history whispered through the grove, urging Jen to turn back as she stumbled upon a family of multicolored bioluminescent creatures darting around her feet, their soft glow illuminating the dark soil but also emphasizing her isolation. In her frantic state, she fought the rising tide of despair, the overwhelming realization that Mia's fate could mirror Brad's. A sudden shake of the earth, a tremor that rippled beneath her, startled her into clarity. It was as if the island itself was pulsating, alive with the throbbing impulse of something far larger than her own struggle. But as she pressed further into the thick thicket, Jen felt an ominous calm settle over her surroundings, an unsettling peace that made every hair stand on end. The sun dipped below the horizon, surrendering the last fragments of daylight. Shadows stretched like claws from the foliage, crawling closer, enveloping her in impending darkness. Anxiety coiled tightly in her stomach as she prepared for what lay ahead, an all-consuming uncertainty. Even the forest was still now, the hum of life fading away as the true predator emerged, lurking. The soft sound of scraping, a low growl reverberated, shoving Jen into a parallel realm of dread. In that fleeting moment, beneath the canopy punctured by slivers of starlight, she knew she was not alone. Something primal thrummed through the air, sharper than the knife edge of fear. Jen's heart raced as she held her breath, straining to discern between the rustling leaves and the echoing presence stalking her. She grasped her makeshift weapon, a crude spear fashioned from pointed driftwood and jagged stone, and steeled herself. The bush parted with a violent shudder, pulling a monstrous silhouette forth, festooned in dark scales that glistened like the deepest waters. The creature stood as an embodiment of every silent fear she harbored, eyes glowing with abominable intelligence, a predator, a nightmare come to life. Jen felt the primal urge to flee clawing at her instincts, but her feet remained rooted, caught in the frightening thrill of survival. The confrontation teetered on the brink, shrouded in impending danger, dripping with tension so thick it was almost tangible. Holding steady, She braced herself against the tide of fear that threatened to sweep her away. With a single alertness ignited, determination surged within her. Whatever clutched at the shadows, ready to pounce at the slightest misstep, would encounter every ounce of her fury. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a vibrant array of oranges and purples across the sky, but the beauty of the sunset was starkly contrasted by the growing tension in Jen's chest. The island felt alive, its shadows stretching like dark fingers, seeking the light. She and Lucas navigated their way toward the heart of the jungle, driven by the need to confront the terror that had taken Mia. Each rustle of leaves and distant cry of unknown creatures amplified their anxiety. In the days that followed their flight from the beach, every step deeper into the island felt as though they were crossing an invisible threshold into something otherworldly. The trees towered like ancient giants, their gnarled roots twisting ominously along the ground. Bioluminescent fungi clung to their bases, glowing like trapped stars, casting an eerie light that illuminated the path ahead. Jen's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the crude spear they had fashioned from sharpened branches and jagged stones, its weight a reminder of the dangers that lay ahead. As they delved deeper into the forest, the air thickened with humidity and the scent of damp earth, mingled with a metallic tang that spoke of past battles long forgotten. With every step, Jen's thoughts spiraled between fear and determination, the image of Mia's face haunting her. What had happened to her? The unanswered questions gnawed at her very core, but she sought solace in the notion that this wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about avenging a friend. Lucas moved beside her, his normally chatty demeanor subdued, the weight of their situation pressing down on him. Though they had stumbled upon an unlikely camaraderie, words were sparse between them, punctuated only by the rustle of leaves overhead and the distant sounds of the island's nocturnal life awakening. Jen could sense his internal struggle battling against the encroaching dread, but their mutual purpose, liberation from the island's grip, bound them closer than any words could. Suddenly, the stillness shattered. A primal roar echoed through the trees, sending tremors through the ground and into their bones. Jen's heart raced, her instincts screaming danger. This was the creature, and it was drawing nearer. The canopy above swayed ominously as if the trees themselves were fleeing from the impending confrontation. They found a clearing where the trees parted, revealing a moonlit glade. Thick fog curled around their feet, and the air felt charged, alive with anticipation. It was there that Jen felt the presence of something otherworldly, something sinister waiting just out of sight. The atmosphere grew heavy, an unseen weight settling on her chest while adrenaline coursed through her veins, illuminating her senses and halting time. In the center of the glade stood a stone altar, worn and hauntingly familiar, with engravings depicting the legends of a creature that had stalked the island for eons. It told tales of loss, of blood spilled under the moonlight, a trend that seemed all too familiar for Jen. The carvings depicted a hybrid of various animals, a serpent's tail, the wings of a massive bat, and the form of a great cat, powerful and imposing. As their eyes scanned the altar, the creature emerged from the shadows, a massive beast with iridescent scales that shimmered with hues of green and blue, reflecting the light in waves. It was a sight both terrifying and mesmerizing, filled with an ancient intelligence that sent chills racing down Jen's spine. The creature was larger than any earthly animal, towering above them like a nightmare-given form. It fixed its glowing eyes on them, each resembling the depth of dark oceans, filled with hunger and fury. There was something disturbingly human in its gaze, a spark of rationality veiled by the bestial rage. For a moment, Jen felt a wave of sympathy, a haunting realization of what it might have once been before the curse of the island warped its existence into that of a monster. But there was no time for empathy now. It was a predator, and they were its prey. Lucas clenched the sharp stone he held, his fear morphing into resolve as he mimicked Jen's stance, nearly mirroring her short breath and taut muscles bracing for the inevitable clash. Together, they crouched low, their hearts beating in synchrony, a primal rhythm echoing the pulse of the island around them. The beast lunged with a ferocious growl that rumbled through the ground, and instinct kicked in. Jen launched herself to the side, narrowly evading its initial attack. The air crackled with energy as it struck the ground, sending shards of dirt and rock flying into the night. Lucas, quick on his feet, swung the makeshift weapon, aiming for the creature's exposed flank, but the powerful tail swept him off balance, sending him crashing into a nearby tree. Jen's determination solidified into raw fury as she leapt to her feet, the image of Mia's absence igniting a fire in her chest. She had to believe that they could win. She hurled her spear with all her might, aiming for the creature's throat, and the weapon embedded deep into the iridescent scales. The beast howled, the sound reverberating through the very air they breathed. With a piercing cry that mixed pain with rage, it turned its sights onto her, and in that moment, she saw the fearsome might of its claws poised to strike. Jen dashed backwards, moving with agility born from desperation, her heart thunderous. As shadows danced around her, the storm brewing overhead unleashed a torrential downpour, turning the ground beneath her into a slick of mud and chaos. The rain fell in heavy sheets, obscuring vision, but Jen's senses sharpened. The sound of claws slashing through air and the frantic movements of the beast turned the environment into a battleground filled with uncertainty. She could taste the metallic tang of her own fear, yet she pressed on, fueled by the primal instinct to survive. With each move, she felt more in control, strategizing amid the chaos. She advanced as the creature lunged again, narrowly missing her as she sidestepped, bringing her remaining weapon down with a force that echoed through the glade. The creature roared, serpentine tail swiping dangerously close. As the beast staggered back, a low growl emanating from within its core, Jen noticed a dark void where its heart should have been. It was as if the creature was hollowed out by its relentless fury and hunger, an embodiment of every lost soul it had consumed to sustain its monstrous existence. Amidst the chaos, Lucas regained his footing, rejoining the fray. With renewed vigor, he charged alongside Jen, and together they orchestrated an attack, coordinating their movements in a desperate dance of life and death. They were no longer simply fighting for survival. They were battling against the very essence of despair that the creature represented. But then, with a swift motion, the creature surged toward Lucas, its eyes narrowing in predatory focus. With adrenaline surging through every fiber of her being, Jen stood amidst the chaos, the air charged with the scent of salt and blood. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, amplifying her senses in ways she had never imagined possible. The thunderous growls of the creature echoed in the humid air, reverberating off the twisted trees that surrounded her, creating a symphony of terror that threatened to swallow every ounce of her courage. It was a moment suspended in time, a crescendo of her fears, heartbreak, and determination. As the beast writhed in the moonlight, the scales of its body glimmered like obsidian under the celestial watch of the stars. Each pulsating movement was a testament to its primal strength, a dark majesty that rendered Jen both awed and terrified. It lunged again, a sweeping motion of claws that sliced through the air, narrowly missing her as she ducked and rolled into the shadows, heart racing like a wild drum. Every instinct in her screamed for self-preservation, but a spark deep inside ignited her resolve, a fire fueled by both the loss of her friends and the primal instinct to survive. Jen remembered the whispers of the island, the patterns in the blood-stained sand, and the way the stars had aligned that fateful night when everything changed. Those memories coalesced into a sharp clarity, transforming her fear into fierce determination. The creature growled, confusion flickering in its dark eyes as it struggled to locate its prey. With a quick glance, Jen observed the remnants of their previous encounter, shards of metal from the wreckage, fragmented weaponry that lay strewn about. She knew she had to fight if there was even a glimmer of hope left for her struggle. In that dire moment, she recalled the spear she had crafted from sharpened wood and stone, a makeshift weapon that now felt like a key to reclaiming her power over her narrative. Jen seized the spear with a mix of trepidation and resolve, her grip tightening against the weathered wood. As the creature advanced, jaws agape, poised to strike, she charged forward, meeting the beast head-on, heart pounding in sync with the thunderous beats of the island. Time slowed as she thrust the spear forward with all her strength. It found its mark, plunging deep into the creature's side. Blood erupted like a geyser, splattering against her face and skin. The beast howled, a guttural cry that shook the ground and sent a tremor through her very soul. It staggered back, giving Jen precious moments to regroup, to fortify her resolve, and to prepare for what was to come next. The two opponents circled one another, a tense ritual of life and death unfolding on the cursed beach. Jen's breath quickened, each inhale heavy with the metallic tang of the air and the ghosts of her fallen friends whispering through the wind. Yet, there was an undeniable fire within her, the flame of survival casting illuminating shadows over the terrifying darkness that enveloped the island. This was not just a battle for her life, it was a reckoning, a confrontation of all the fears that had haunted her during her time in isolation and despair. With renewed vigor, she charged once more, this time aiming for a decisive strike. The beast roared, charging forward, but Jen was faster. Dodging to the side, she used its momentum against it, driving the spear deep into the beast's neck, finding a chink in its armor. The world spun around her as her instincts took over, guided by primal survival that had long been dormant within her. The creature thrashed violently, and for a brief moment, time felt as if it stood still. Jen recognized the struggle. She was not merely fighting an animal. She was battling the shadows of her own past, the weight of her fears, and the despair that had clung to her since awakening on the shores of the cursed island. Each thrust carried the weight of heartbreak, each movement a release of the anguish she had endured alone. Power surged through her, a force she had never known. The tide of their battle turned as the scales of the creature dulled, its growls becoming more desperate, more afraid. Jen understood that this fight was her own resurrection, a final charge into the abyss, coupled with the knowledge that through suffering, she could claim her victory. It became clear that survival meant embracing the darkness, harnessing it to create her own light. In a blinding finale, she struck one last time, severing the beast's head from its body. The fallen creature collapsed onto the sand, its life extinguished, leaving Jen standing amidst the chaos, power coursing through her veins. Bruised and breathless, she overlooked the fallen foe, her heart steadied by a bittersweet triumph. In those moments of silence that followed the storm, Jen felt an overwhelming sense of catharsis flood over her. The coastline, once burdened with shadows of despair, now felt different, alive with a palpable energy. As night turned to dawn, blades of sunlight began to pierce through the murky clouds, illuminating the wreckage around her. She raised the severed head high, cascading waves crashing against the shore as if in reverence to her victory. The message was clear. She had survived, and in doing so, claimed her place in the annals of the island's history. The island, once a harbinger of chaos, began to transform in her mind, now a canvas for resilience and a reminder of the strength she possessed. With the dawn came a new realization. The battle was not merely against a creature of the deep, but one against the overwhelming darkness that threatens to suffocate the spirit. Those who had walked with her, who had shared stolen moments of laughter and fear, now existed as part of her unyielding narrative. Jen knew the journey ahead would not be devoid of challenges, but she felt a kinship with the island and all its secrets. She was resolved to heal, to honor those lost by embracing the light she had discovered within herself. The echoes of the past whispered in the winds as the waves continued to crash, a perpetual rhythm that marked the heartbeat of survival itself. As she turned away from the beast, setting her gaze toward the horizon, a sense of tranquility enveloped her. The monsters of the past could no longer linger, and as she breathed in the crisp air, clarity dawned. A truth she would carry with her. That sometimes it is in facing the depths of our fears that we uncover the greatest strength within. In the end, it was not just the monster that had been defeated. It was her own self-doubt, her grief, and the shadows that had sought to imprison her spirit. There would always be mystery in the depths of the ocean, but there, on the shores of that once harrowing island, Jen had rekindled the flame of hope, empowering her to carve a path through the uncertainties ahead. A path laden with promise, healing, and the promise of brighter dawns. If you liked this story based on real events, subscribe to our channel and don't forget to like it. Here you can dive into a different reality every day, where anything can happen. Comment below what kind of story you would like to hear here. Thank you very much for your attention. We are the Sci-Fi family.